start. Hey everyone, and welcome to We Should Talk About This, the show where we dive into unfiltered conversations about business, work, and life. I'm your host, Amy Seddon, and I'm here with my brilliant co-host, Nilofer Rao.
Hello. Hi, everyone. We started this podcast because honestly, these are the conversations we were already having late at night, over coffee, voice notes, and texts about everything from navigating careers to figuring out how to actually live a smarter, better life while realizing that the issues that we were all facing are the same across the world, whether you live in India, UAE, or the US. So grab your coffee, your wine, your spreadsheet, whatever you need, and let's get into it. Amy, please tell us, what are you reading or watching nowadays?
So I'm still reading Onyx Storm, but I'm also reading, because I read multiple books at one time, I'm reading Persuasion by Jane Austen. I haven't read all her books, so I thought it'd be interesting to read more of her books. Also, the book club I'm in, it's the pick for the month.
Got it. That's so fun.
What about you? You're still on Sarah J. Maas?
Yes, I'm doing a tandem read. People say you should do a tandem read, which I've never done in my life before.
Wait, I don't know what that is. You gotta tell me.
So tandem read is basically when you read two books from the same series at the same time. So I'm
How do you do
flipping.
that?
So there is an online guide, and it basically tells you that you should read like chapter 4 to 5 of Empire of Storms, and then you switch to like chapter 6 from Tower of Dawn. And so you're basically like going between the two books because they're happening at the same time.
Okay. But it's the same series, so doesn't it need to go sequential order?
Different characters have split up. So like few characters are in different part of the world, and then different characters, like few characters are in different part of the world. And it's
Oh,
all
I
happening
see.
at the same time.
You're creating your own book. Like they wrote the story where they split
Sure.
like a timeline, and you're like, I don't like this timeline, so I'm gonna do it my own way.
Yeah. And so what I'd heard was that Tower of Dawn, which is like the second last book, is really, really boring, the first 26 chapters. And everyone struggles through it. And then people who did the tandem read said that they really liked the tandem read because the main characters are in Empire of Storms, which is the fifth book, and then this is the sixth book. And like flipping back and forth just really helped them power through this one.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's good to learn like different ways. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today on We Should Talk About This, we're kicking things off with something many of us think about, but few of us feel totally confident doing, asking for a promotion. Specifically, how to actually get promoted and how to ask for more money without spiraling into self-doubt.
Let's get tactical. If you are in task mode, checking boxes, saying yes to every task, you're probably doing a good job, maybe even a great job. But good or great doesn't get you promoted. Strategic and proper networking within the company gets you promoted. You've got to link your work to business outcomes and show that you understand the bigger picture and play the politics.
I totally agree. If you're too good at being the team's go-to order taker, you become the forever reliable person who never moves up. Instead, you need to start driving your own work streams, pitch initiatives, and show leadership that you can do work beyond your job description.
Let's talk about money. Negotiating a raise is definitely not the time to bring up personal issues. It's about business. You should be able to quantify the value that you bring to the table. Are you meeting your KPIs? Are you saving time? Are you automating or improving processes or innovating? And the most important one, at my firm at least, was, are you already functioning at the next level?
I agree. And I would say one of the best pieces of advice I got from a mentor of mine was keeping a running list of my wins. I recommend a weekly doc stating what you worked on, what impact did you have, even if you can pull metrics of things that you've accomplished. I would even put a calendar invite, like reminder every Friday to do this because I know we all get really busy, but you want to have a record of what you've accomplished. So when that time comes to have that conversation, you have bullet points that you can bring up with your manager of why you deserve that raise.
I agree 100%. And I think what you told about the mentor is just so relevant. I would do the same. And I would, in fact, have a shared document with my manager on my KPIs and what I have achieved so far. And I recommended the same to all my reportees because end of the year, when you start writing the review, you forget about all the things that you did in the past 12 months. And sometimes something might look very big or small, but when you actually look at it in retrospect, your thought process about that might change. So I have a controversial question for you. Do you think that a 3 to 5% salary bump as a promotional bump does anything? Does that signify a promotion to you?
Honestly, I think this is a way for companies to keep good employees happy and or quote unquote happy and staying at the job because a 5% bump, it isn't a promotion. It's just a market rate inflation increase. And I think someone in that position who's looking for a promotional raise should start to think about preparing all those points we discussed before and then asking for a promotion during that cycle when it comes in.
I think one thing that I will add here is that with Amazon, one of the ways that he could ask for like for an increase, and I'm not even talking about a promotion, I'm just talking about like a normal increase, is that if you have an offer from another firm, you can basically show that offer and ask for an increase. Now, this would have worked, I think, up until 2022. It doesn't work anymore, where Amazon says, well, we value you, and I'm sure you're more valuable at another company. So you can actually leave and take that increase. But this is what we will be paying. Before I close on this, I have to ask, what is the most ridiculous reason or story that you've heard of for someone not getting promoted?
That's a good question. And I know that we both have heard plenty of stories of people not getting a promotion or just bad work experiences. One story that I've heard of is I had a friend who told me that she was expecting to get a promotion in the next promotional cycle. And she even talked about this with her manager. But instead, when that annual meeting came around, she ended up getting laid off. And this wasn't a normal, like, the company was like laying off a bunch of people and they were making changes. This was a complete shock to my friend. And it was just bad communication and bad relationship or team dynamics. And they wanted to do like a whole refresh of the team. To me, that's really shitty. And I feel like we need more transparency and communication in the workplace.
And why you need to manage politics at workplace if you want to get promoted?
I know. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the other side of promotions that no one talks about. It's the behind the scenes. And how do you navigate the system? Because in both big and small companies, like we both have experience at various sizes, it's all about navigating the office politics, knowing the right people, and fighting some of these ingrained corporate biases, especially against women, that I knew both of us were not really aware of when we started working.
Yeah. When I was in business school, I'll be 100% honest, I really didn't think some of these issues that women discussed in class were that dire, especially when you go to these clubs and become part of like women in entrepreneurship and women in business clubs. You really think things like being passed up for a promotion, gender bias, or the lack of women in leadership roles is not that widespread. But the reality is very different once you join these corporations and you see in person what that looks like.
Yeah, it really is crazy. I came from a finance background, and so there's not a lot of women in leadership. I did experience some women in leadership, but it's not enough. And we definitely need more women who are climbing the ladder.
Exactly. And it's the same as I would I wish I could say that it was different in big tech, but it's actually very similar to finance. Having worked at a big firm, name dropping Amazon here in the Middle East, and seeing women around me, especially those that are in their mid 30s who are now moms, I just really get when they were talking about gender biases and the limited opportunities for women to step up. It hits differently when you're living it or watching it unfold right in front of you. In fact, I think it really impacted me the most when 2 years ago, I was sitting on an annual leadership review, and this was with like the CXO of the MENA region. And I looked around and realized that in that room of like 25 to 30 people, there were only two women in the room. And it was me and my skip manager. It was so jarring to see how underrepresented women are. And it just broke my heart at that time. I was so proud of my skip for being in that room, but it's also so sad when you look around and all these men are talking and you feel like you don't have a space on that table to even speak up.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've seen it. It's crazy that this is global, right? Like I'm in the US and you worked in multiple countries and we have experienced this where women don't have a seat at the table. And I think that even when women do have a seat at the table, they're highly judged, highly criticized, and it's hard for them to make that impact.
One big difference that I've noticed is how all of this plays out in consulting versus the big tech. We will get into it later, but before that, let's get started into behind the scenes for promotions in corporate work culture. How was that for you? Was your promotion political? And how many women made it to leadership where you were at?
Yeah, great question. So for me, at every company that I've worked for, both big and small, promotions were political. It's not just what you can accomplish or how good you are at work. It's also about who you know. You have to advocate for yourself, but you also have to find people that will advocate for you because when these decisions are made, you don't always have the voice to talk about what you've accomplished and what you deserve. What about for you, Nilofer? How is it working at Amazon?
How much time do we have to talk about this? Can go on
I
and
know,
on and
right?
on.
I
There's just
know.
so much angst with regards to this conversation. But at Amazon, promotions are a thing. They're really long and hard. I would say it's quite political, although to be fair to the company, they when they designed the process, they did try to make it as objective as possible. I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, but I can just give a little bit of perspective in terms of how I have seen it happen in my org and the orgs that I know. So the reality of it is that you need a role with enough scope to justify a promotion. You should already be operating at that scope for at least 3 to 6 months. Your manager and their manager, which means my skip, needs to be aligned so that they know and they can plan for your promotion. You need feedback from at least 6 people, and 8 is recommended, not including your manager or their directs. So anyone that I worked with from my manager's team, which is like my immediate colleagues, could not write my feedback. And they have to be at a level higher than me or even higher. So if I'm applying for an L6, I need to have at least 4 to 5 L6 feedbacks, and I need to have at least 3 to 4 L7 or L8's feedback. And L8 is a director, by the way.
That's crazy. Like that, I feel like the way you're describing it, I'm like, how do people even get promoted?
I do not know. I genuinely do not know. I do not know how I got promoted. And then it does not end there. So your manager basically has to write like a long document, basically detailing what you've done so far, talking about all the different leadership principles that you've showcased. He gets the feedback from like these 6 to 8 people. And then your manager has to present your case to a committee of, I think it's like 6 people, and you need to have a majority. A committee that ideally should be randomly selected. But the reality on the ground is that your manager and HR team probably play a huge role in deciding who can be on the committee. And then I think up until this part, it's all politics, it's all visibility, it's all about who you know, how well did you plan it, who wrote your feedback, who's on the committee. So once this document is done and the committee says, yes, we want this person to get promoted, it then goes to a VP anywhere in the world. And that VP has to objectively read that document and then finally sign off on it. And that's how you get promoted at Amazon.
I feel like I have to take a pause just to digest all of that. To give Amazon credit, like it's a there's a process and it's standardized, and I think they're trying to make it fair, and that's not the case for a lot of companies. But there's something nice about simplicity, and that just seems way too complicated. So I'll just add, I did work at a large company and it was similar. It wasn't as convoluted as Amazon, but it's the same dynamics where you have all the directors sitting in a room and basically pitching who they think deserves to get promoted. We said all the way in the beginning is that you need to have good conversations with your manager and discuss how you're adding value. This is a reason why, because you're not going to be in the room when your manager is talking and advocating for you to get a promotion. But on top of all of that, I also needed to have a good rapport with a ton of different people because the other directors of other teams needed to know who I was so that they can vote for me. So, very similar or somewhat similar to Amazon. It's just a way bigger picture than you just saying, hey, look at all the work I've done. I want a raise.
Yeah. And your manager, like you said, I don't think I can stress enough on this. Your manager plays a huge role on how it all plays out. And it was a very similar case for me as well, where my manager, for all his faults, I have to give him credit for planning my promotion in such a way that I worked on these projects that gave me that visibility with some of the people that ended up being on my committee. You never know who's going to end up being on your committee and whatever not, but I think I have to give him credit for pushing me on projects or pushing me in front of people that kind of mattered or that he thought mattered. And I think that made all the difference eventually when it came down to it. How about you, Amy? Was your experience completely different working at a smaller firm when you compare it to a behemoth like an Amazon or even your previous bigger organization?
Yeah, I would say that working at a smaller company of only like 100 employees, I think that the process, well, really, there wasn't a formal standard process, nothing like Amazon, but there's still a social game and your relationships with other teams, other managers, and even your own manager, it did matter. But there was like no committee. What I didn't like is that often people got promoted because their manager advocated for them. And that didn't mean that person deserved to get promoted. It was just that that manager was more talkative. And so they would bring it up. Hey, I have an employee, the person's great. I think the person deserved like a huge promotion. It wouldn't be like what we're describing as a 10 to 15% promotion. Sometimes these people would get 20% and that would take away from the budget where other people wouldn't get promoted. It was a crazy experience and I would say that what my company did, which I would recommend for a lot of companies, is they actually brought someone in to review the culture and the promotion cycle and even like train managers on how to work with their teams. And she was like hugely influential in changing this promotional process. And I think like through her review, like she was able to find that people that should have gotten promoted didn't get promoted or never got promoted. And there were people that got promoted that shouldn't or got just too high of a bump. So it was interesting to actually see how reviewing the process can improve the company morale and also retain good talent.
What is interesting is that it seems chaotic and political with or without a proper defined process. So here is something that blew my mind. Sometimes, even if your manager is aligned with your promotion and you have a whole timeline set, it might still be out of their hands. So I was actually talking to a friend who's been waiting for this promotion for the past 6 months. And she was recently told that she has to wait for at least one more year because HR froze promotions at that level. They said it was overinflated. And so they have to fix that, which means they either need to hire more junior people or they need to freeze those promotions to make it come back to that pyramid shape. And that just blew my mind. Can you imagine waiting a year and a half for a promotion that you were told about a lot earlier?
No, that's it's so frustrating. It's demotivating. I feel like at that point, I would probably leave. And I know that's easier said than done. Often, if you've been at a company for some time, it's hard to convince yourself to search for another job or even find a better job. And change is hard. But I've heard so many of these stories that you're describing of people thinking they're going to get a promotion and they don't get a promotion because something has changed.
And even when you finally do get promoted, it really makes you question the payoff, especially with the big organizations. I think from whatever I've heard, it takes about 2 to 3 years between sort of two roles to get promoted. And then when you hear the pay bump, it's like 10, 15%, depending on where you are in the band. It really makes me wonder if all that stress and all that hard work for the past 2 or 3 years was just really worth it for that percentage increase.
Totally agree. That's what really gets me is that I don't think the payout, like the promotional payout, equates to the increase in workload. It's one of those things that really frustrates me that like a company can get all excited, your boss can get all excited and say, "Oh, here's a 10% raise." And then at the end of the day, when you actually start getting that paycheck, you're like, "Is this worth it?"
The worst is I heard of another story where the manager looked at sort of the salaries of this particular person, compared it within the band and said, you know what, you should actually be getting, I'll take a random number, $2,000 more per month.
Yeah.
Because when you
That's
sort of,
awful.
yeah, like this is a conversation that this person has had with their manager, and the manager has categorically said, you should be making more money. You are below, like how you have these salary bands. So he's like, you're below the average. We need to pull you up. And I will put in a request to HR to adjust that. Now, this firm for the year 2024 has given out 0% base salary increase. If she was expecting almost like a 8% to 9% adjustment, just because of the rating that she had, she probably just got a 2% increase. And she had to let go of that 6%. Now, the kicker is next year, again, if the company says 0% increase, she's stuck at that level. She will never move up within the ladder for the number of years that she will be at the same level. And so promotions aren't just about performance, they're about visibility, politics, and timing. And it's the same thing with a raise. It's about managing the expectations with your manager and hopefully taking him in confidence and asking him about all of these questions. And that's something that I never truly understood because that's not me as a person, but it is what it is. And it's the reality of the world.
Yeah. Let's pivot and talk about like women and the promotional cycle. Because after us talking about behind the scenes of what's going on, you start to see why so few women are at the top. So imagine taking like a 9 months maternity leave, then coming back. Well, let me just back up. 9 months is probably way too long in the US, but maybe abroad. But we have women who take maternity leave and then they come back and they end up not being able to jump in to work as quickly or even jump back into the same pace that they were before. And you're off that promotional train while, your male counterparts just keep moving up. And it feels like women have to start from scratch.
I will add this that India gives a very generous maternity leave with the labor laws saying that when the woman comes back, she has to be offered a similar role at the same level and the same salary. So India is trying to really protect it. And I think 9 months is standard. You can go up to 1 year.
The US is just horrible.
Yeah. And then the UAE has also become very generous. I think earlier it wasn't that long, but now with Amazon, at least it was almost 5 months. However, to be fair to Amazon, where credit is due, I know of at least two women who got promoted while they were on their maternity leave. And I think it was mainly driven by their manager, which is honestly amazing. However, I feel like that was more the exception and not the norm or not the rule. For most women, coming back and catching up can be incredibly tough.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is something that we haven't experienced, but it makes us really think about it and question what we want in our personal lives because of the impact in our professional lives. And I don't think men work like that or think like that. So it's definitely an issue in the workplace, and we need more flexibility and support for women. And we need a better environment that can help women stay and grow within a company.
Yeah. While a lot has been done already, I think there's still a long way to go when it comes to dealing with gender equality and workplace biases. I will say this that not all the companies are the same. I feel like looking at my partner's experience in consulting, I see how different things can be. Although part of it is obviously driven by the kind of work that they do, which is very project based, and you're not at it the whole time and you're not tied to a client. My partner's female colleagues are genuinely treated as equals before maternity, during maternity, and post maternity. They get the time and the support they need during and after maternity leave. And if they hit their utilization targets and all the sort of other criteria, promotions are not penalized.
That sounds really nice. I do agree. There are companies that are working on this. I think it's important to continue to bring awareness that it's still unbalanced and there needs to be more discussions about how difficult it is for women to have a family and also have a professional career. And beyond just having a family and having a career, it's also women need to be respected in the workplace.
Yeah, I have had a few experiences that has made me question the people that I work with around me. So I've always been a morning person. I would typically be the first one in the office at 8 a.m. and I would try to leave by 6 so that I could go home, have dinner with my partner who basically travels 3 to 4 days a week for work. However, when I moved to a new team, the norm within the team was basically to show up at 11 and they would continue to work until 8 or 9 p.m. So when you look at the amount of hours, it's pretty much the same. But there was this aspect of penalizing the other person for leaving early, and I'll get into it. But I wonder how that was in the States. Have you felt the same way where your flexibility was not respected?
That sounds really difficult, and I can't imagine. I feel like I am also a morning person, so shifting my time would be difficult. I feel really lucky because I've worked on teams that really respected my time and work life balance. I had people on my teams like taking calls as they're going to pick up their kid from school, or even like they're on the soccer fields and they're taking a work call. And honestly, I didn't think anything of it. That was just the normal culture of my company. We need that more.
That's what we need. And so when I was talking about me being a morning person, I realized later on that while my manager never said anything about it, it's not just about your manager, it's also about your teammates and the environment that you work in. So one day there was another person on the team who made a comment to this new person who's joined. And he was right in front of me. He was like, "You should learn from Nilofer how to leave early." And he said it like a joke, but it wasn't a joke. He was basically telling me that I half finished my work and I bounce at 5.
It's so passive aggressive. It's hard to manage. How do you deal with that?
And there were people on the team who had kids, and I think everyone had a very different understanding when you had a kid. So it was like whether you had a kid or you didn't have a kid. And if you didn't have a kid, no flexibility. If you have a kid, we understand a little bit about that. Like you have a genuine reason.
Wait, I heard a story of it was an old colleague of mine. She lied for years saying she had a kid. She was an older woman and she chose not to have a kid. And she thought that it was unfair that someone who had a kid could be like, "Oh, I can't have this meeting because it's like school pickup." So she had her cat, which was her kid. So maybe we should learn from this woman.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I would do it the next time if I ever go back to corporate life. And that's like kind of the subtle toxicity we don't really talk about and we don't pick up on it until it happens. Just when I was leaving, I realized what he had said and it hit
Mhm.
me and it impacted me for the next few days because every single time I would pick up my bag, I'd be like, oh shit, is everyone talking about me? Like, is it okay to leave? Like, but I finished my work. Like, what do you say if someone says, why are you leaving so early? Do I have to justify what I've done? And that's the sad part.
It is. Some cultures, they want you to just sit there, even if you don't have work, just to be like, I put in the hours. And you see it in the investment banking world. It's getting a lot of talk about how many hours people are working. And it's just not healthy. The passive aggressive is hard too. I've experienced a lot of passive aggressive talk. It really hits in a bad way. I've gotten bosses telling me I'm too emotional or I get upset too much and I shouldn't. Why are you telling me how I should feel? And it took me a while to realize that me getting emotional and being invested in my work is how I bring value and is my strength.
Yeah. And it's really those small things. And I think it takes a while as you get older and as you get more mature and experienced in your work to really identify it and then push back. So I had this another experience since you asked about like the work toxicity, which was like because I would go home at 6, I would just miss these impromptu team drinks because they would spontaneously get up at 7 p.m. and be like, let's go out for drinks. And obviously, I wasn't there. It was these micro moments that build up and sent a message to me that I was really not part of the team. So I got promoted and I obviously got the entire team home. They came, we had a few drinks, they met my partner. But when my manager got promoted, there were a bunch of people in the office like Friday, 7 p.m. And he was like, let's go out and I'll give you my promotion party. And he did that. And then I heard about it on Monday and I was like, why didn't you tell me? And he was like, oh, you were just not there. Well, I was not there because you didn't plan it. I'm not going to be around on a Friday at 7 p.m. to. So I'm happy to do it, but just tell me about it. Don't make me feel
Right.
like I wasn't there by choice.
Right. Some people believe that you really need to commit your whole life to the team, to the company. And I know we both don't feel that way.
So we've talked about the toxicity, the gender biases. What do you think can be done to solve for this?
So, if we really want to see more women rise to leadership, I think there are three things that we need to do. One is we need mentorship programs that actively support and sponsor women. Two is we need true flexibility in how and when we work. And we need people to respect that. And three, we need better overall training for managers and how they manage people because lots of times people get to the top just because they can and not necessarily because they deserve to be there.
Exactly. And we've talked about how important managers are to your promotion, to your daily well being, to your mental health. And look, we'll be honest, we don't have all the answers. These are basis our own experiences. But as with everything, we want to get people thinking and talking.
Anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on We Should Talk About.